Hi everyone, this is DeFi Dad. Today I'm going to show you a strategy for how I choose where to do my lending, which helps me then to maximize the interest that I'm earning when I'm lending my Ethereum-based assets. And so it really starts with me thinking about what are the different options available. How can I maximize my interest according to, what are the lending rates that are available? What digital assets do I have, like DAI or Ether or SNX? And then is there a way for me to maximize interest without chasing yield? And when I say chasing yield, I mean that if I were to check this daily, these rates are constantly changing because these rates are dictated by how utilized the pools are. So if there's a pool of, let's pretend, $100 million, the more of that pool that's been borrowed, normally the higher the lending rate or the supply rate, because it's incentivizing me and others to put more money in so that we can earn more interest, but also so that the pool can keep up with the demand for borrowing. So there's actually a hack to this called a yield bouncer, and I'm going to also talk you through this today with IDLE.FINANCE. I'm also going to talk you through and really just remind you actually of how I use Curve. And one of the pools, specifically the Y pool, uses a yield bouncing strategy on top of the fact that there are market making fees. There's also staked Ray, which is ROBO-ADVISOR for yield. And the newest entrant into this space is RARI Capital. So we're going to just kind of talk through all of these, but also, help to understand where it is that I'm willing to have exposure to my lending assets. The first step in this process is understanding what lending pools are available, what are the rates available so that I can maximize my lending interest, and then also keeping in mind how to compare the platform risk in using any of these lending pools. I'm not a smart contract auditor, so I don't have the right to be telling anyone what is a safe or less safe platform, but I'm just going to lean on what is the DeFi score here, which is a consistently comparable value for measuring platform risk based on factors including smart contract, centralization, and financial risk. So I'm going to use this, just to help me at least compare these platforms and decide, of course, whether or not I don't want exposure to one of these platforms. So I'm at defiscore.io. Once you get there, you click on compare lending platforms and it'll take you to this dashboard. And then depending on what assets I have in my wallet or which assets I'm willing to have exposure to, like let's say, USDC, there's True USD, there's Tether, there's synthetic USD, there's SNX, and so on. So all of this starts with what are the assets that I have in my wallet that are potentially idle assets just sitting there that I can put to work lending and earning interest. And so for me, that normally starts with a token like DAI, which is a digital dollar that is decentralized and is backed by Ether loans and some other crypto asset loans in MakerDAO. So if I'm going to lend my stablecoin DAI, these are the different rates and the different platforms that offer them. These rates change daily. So there is no guarantee that tomorrow Compound will be offering 1.92% or that Aave will be offering a higher rate of 6.38%. It is always possible that one of these pools skyrockets, let's say up to 10%, or another one of these falls down to below 1%. And so that's something we're going to talk about in just a bit, about how to use a yield bouncer to be able to maximize that yield. So anyways, I'm looking at these. Okay, this all looks good to me so far. If I was going to lend into a single pool, again, I might choose Nuo or dYdX or Aave. They have the highest rates here. Another factor here, though, to consider, since I am going to eventually use a yield bouncer, and it's going to automatically move my DAI to whichever pool has the highest rate, I'm also going to look at what says view details. So this gives me an understanding of what is this DeFi score like, and it's out of 10. And basically this helps me to understand why is it a 6.4 out of 10. Uh, I think in these early days, I really don't have a gauge for, what is bad or good out of 10. I do know that if you have a 10 out of 10, that's really good. And if you have a 1 out of 10, that's probably not good. But anyways, I can look at this and figure out, okay, why does Aave have a 6.4 out of 10? They have a bug bounty, so that's good. They're incentivizing folks to look for bugs. So that's a good thing with any sort of protocol. Time index, how long has the protocol operated on mainnet without an exploit? Not really sure in terms of like when was the last quote unquote exploit. Utilization index, is the market sufficiently over collateralized to protect from the collateral price volatility? So that here is 14%. Again, not really sure what it means, but these are at least the factors that go into it. There's also, is it audited? Yes, that's obviously a good thing. Centralization index, to what degree is the platform centralized, who holds the admin keys, and so on. And then liquidity index, is there enough liquidity to ensure that lenders can exit their positions at will? So anyways, this is something I'd encourage anyone to take a look at, but at the same time, I can't offer much more on that. All I focus on is what are these comparable scores? And I can see that dYdX does have a better score than Aave. Aave has a better score than Nuo. Compound has a better score than all of them. dYdX is a little bit less than Aave and a little bit better than Nuo. DDEX has a higher score there. And then Oasis actually has the highest score, which is the app that is run by the MakerDAO Foundation. So we've got all of that to keep in mind. I guess really for me, the question at this point, since I'm going to use a yield bouncer, is there a platform here that I do not want exposure to? And if there is one, I would take note of that. And then when I eventually choose my yield bouncer, I want to make sure that that yield bouncer doesn't have exposure to that pool, or that I have the ability to mark off that I don't want my funds moving to that pool. I'm going to walk you through 4 different yield bouncers. A yield bouncer is really what it sounds like in the name. It's bouncing your assets to wherever the interest rates are highest. And so the goal here is to move my DAI, in this case, to whichever lending pools are earning the highest interest rates. And each one of these different yield bouncers has its own unique strategy, but it also means that they come with different risks. So I'll try to call that out along the way. So if I'm using staked ROBO-ADVISOR for yield, or abbreviated RAI, I want to just go to stake.us and then click on the ROBO-ADVISOR. It'll take you here. I'm opening up a new RAI versus if I already had one. So I'm going to click here. Then I can decide from just these 4 assets. So I'm going to choose DAI. Okay, so for me to get started, it's really straightforward. I just need to, of course, connect my wallet, which I've already done this. So I should be just giving approval. By the way, I am going to be editing out some of these parts just because it might show certain wallets that I would like to keep private, given the new MetaMask interface. Now that my wallet is connected, I'm just going to specify how much DAI I'd like to lend. And then below, I'm able to choose which of the lending pools I'm willing to have exposure to. Now, there are 5 different pools that RAI optimizes lending interest across, and that's all here. The DAI savings rate refers to Oasis. So if we were looking back at the DeFi score, you'll notice it is over here. There we go, with the 9.7 score. So another thing to note here is that they are no longer lending to Fulcrum, but they may in the future. The lending was shut off to Fulcrum due to the flash loan incident that happened with BZX then. So anyways, if you leave this checked in the future, if and when they begin lending there again, it just means that your DAI could move into that pool. So for right now, I'll just leave it checked as is. And other than that, I'm all good to go. So I would just click deposit funds, and then this will take me through 2 different MetaMask transactions. So I would go through an approval transaction, and then that's followed then by the actual execute transaction that moves my 10 DAI into staked. So that's really it. That's how staked works. I would say that the risk here, per usual, is smart contracts. And if we're lending across these 5 different pools, that means I have exposure to smart contract risk across all 5 of these. There's also the smart contracts involved, or the code that's involved with staked. And while all 6 of those have audits, at the same time, like, it's just good to be conscious of this. And again, I always am mindful of the fact that any money I put in, I could potentially lose it all. Would my life go on if I were to lose it? If the answer is yes, I would be fine, then I'm probably okay. That's at least my little golden rule. So beyond the risk, I think my other key takeaway is that I am able to earn 9.55% as of today's historical performance with staked. And so staked, I've used it in the past, and staked, I have always found has outperformed. If I would have put my money into compound or dYdX or the DSR, I have found that I've been able to outperform the market consistently. And I did have numbers a while back when my Ray was open, but I've actually closed it since then. So anyways, I really like using Ray, and I would definitely encourage checking it out. The next yield bouncer that I've used is IDLE.FINANCE, and you can find that at IDLE.FINANCE. What is unique about IDLE is that they actually have 2 different yield bouncing strategies. One is referred to as best yield, so it's just going to move my assets to whichever lending pools are going to maximize my lending interest. They also have risk adjusted. So I don't understand all of the underlying details behind it, but I know that they are taking into account DeFi score. They are not lending in this case to all different pools. There are certain pools that they are not lending to. And then there's a variety of factors that they use to try and avoid, quote unquote, like riskier situations in terms of lending. So this is, in other words, a less aggressive yield bouncing strategy that takes into account risk versus up here where we're just trying to push money to the highest lending interest possible. So when it comes to IDLE, there are 6 different options. These are all of the different assets that I can lend. The top 5 are all stable coins, and then the last one here is wrapped Bitcoin. You'll notice that the stable coins, of course, tend to earn more interest. DAI is currently at 7.148%, and wrapped Bitcoin is around 0.2%. And then if we go down to risk adjusted, the rate actually is not too far off here. Yeah, so 7.1%. APY, so not that much less than the best yield strategy. And then there's USDC and Tether available as well. And I can click on this view stats if you want to dig deeper into the historical performance of some of these different assets. For me, I've got DAI, so I just know that I'm going to lend DAI, and I want to, maximize that yield with it. So I've got the 2 options up above here. If I click on best yield, this shows me that the average APY is 7.15%. I actually just migrated what DAI I had in here into the new version of IDLE. So I had more earnings here before, but you can see it's ticking upwards. So it's a nice little counter just to let you know exactly how much you've earned since depositing into this strategy. And then in this case, I've only got 5.0 I'm sorry, $5.08 or 5.08 DAI. And then if we scroll further here, you can see that I could continue to add more DAI, or I could deposit other assets here. And then just the other option there was the risk adjusted strategy, which is basically going to be the same interface. This works like all other DeFi applications. If I click deposit, it's going to ask me, how much do you want to deposit? So I'll choose DAI, we'll hit deposit. When I deposit, I'm going to first have to enable, which is the usual approval step to say you can move my DAI. And then after that, I'll actually execute the deposit. So there we go. So I would normally work through this transaction. I'm not going to do it right now, but just as a reminder, when I have these approval transactions or any MetaMask transaction, if I click edit and then click on advanced, I want to look at what is the gas price. And then if I look at ethgasstation.info, which I'm looking at on my phone browser right now, it says that if the gas price is less than or greater than 25 GWE, it'll push the transaction through in less than 30 minutes. So anyways, 27 GWE would be enough. I could even like lower this, and this will bring down the amount of gas that I'm going to pay for this transaction. So it just went from 36 cents to 35 cents. So insignificant, but at the same time, it's saved money. The other thing is the permission step. I'm going to click on what permission am I giving. In this case, it would be requesting unlimited permission. I am not one to give unlimited permission in case somehow someone got malicious control of these smart contracts. So I would, in this case, if I was going to deposit, let's say 100 DAI, I would put in 100 as the spend limit, and that would be it. And so I've lowered my gas. I've set the permission to only 100 DAI, and then I would hit confirm. So other than that, with IDLE, I just say that this is another yield bouncer that I've used successfully. I have tracked at the time whether or not I was outperforming the market, and I was. I always gauge that against something like a compound pool or an Aave pool. If I had left my money in one of these individual pools, would it have earned as much interest as it does with IDLE? And again, I can attest this thing works very, very well. So this is another option. I think the coolest thing about them is this risk adjusted versus best yield strategy. In staked, I'm choosing, which of the pools I want exposure to. In this case, I'm choosing something I think that's a little more elegant, but I could also see how someone could say, I'd rather use the ability in stake to actually specify which pools I want to have exposure to. The next yield bouncer is actually a yield bouncer and market making opportunity. This is technically a yield farming opportunity. So this goes actually a step beyond just lending interest. And I've done a video on this before. I'll link it in the show description here on YouTube. But when I am using Curve, Curve is a stablecoin swap, and I can deposit my stable coins, whether they are, in this case, DAI, USDC, Tether, or True USD. And I can allow folks to trade back and forth between those stable coins, and I can earn a proportion of the trade fee that they pay. But I also am benefiting from this yield bouncing strategy. So the one pool in Curve that you would want to check out is the Y pool. The Y pool is based off of IEARN.FINANCE. IEARN.FINANCE is a yield bouncing strategy that is powering this Y Curve pool. So long story short, this doesn't take into account I think risk management that IDLE does with the best yield strategy. It doesn't take into account the specifications of staked ROBO-ADVISOR for yield, where I can choose which pools I do or do not want exposure to. but no surprise, this has been the highest earning yield bouncer strategy. The key takeaway here is that if I'm using this Y pool, the thing that's boosting my yield is not just lending. I'm also exposed to, I'm acting as a market maker is the best way to say it. And I'm depositing my coins, my stable coins, and folks are trading between them, aside from the fact that funds are actually being moved across different lending pools. So you could also say too, in this case, that there's clearly more smart contract risk. If I'm stacking it, this has the most smart contract risk of the three of them that I'm aware of. Again, I will link my previous tutorial that I created on how to earn using this Y pool in Curve. That's at curve.fi/iron/deposit. It's kind of unfair to compare these three because this is going a step beyond with being a market maker and now even having a staking opportunity. But anyways, it's another tool that I've used and I continue to use, even though it comparably has more risk, I would say, based on the exposure to more lending pools and the fact that I am using Curve.Finance. I'm literally stacking more platforms here in this strategy than the amount of platforms I have exposure to through IDLE.FINANCE and Staked Ray. The last yield bouncer I want to talk you through is RARI Capital. This is a brand new one. It just launched. So please be cautious about using this. You'll see here that they've called out, as they should on the front page, that our contracts have undergone security reviews but have not yet been completely audited. That means for me to be overly cautious and to assume that absolutely any money I put into this really could be lost. And it's more likely than ever compared to other apps that have gone through more thorough smart contract audits. So I can find this at app.rari.capital. What is, I guess the key takeaway with RARI Capital is that currently you can lend DAI, USDC, or Tether. There's a $350 limit because of the fact that they're still being audited. Works basically the same way as all the other platforms. You're just gonna choose one of those three stable coins, and then you're gonna put in how much you wanna deposit. Once you click deposit, you'll roll through two different transactions per usual, which is one to give permission to move your token, in this case, my DAI, and then after that to actually execute depositing the DAI. So what's worth calling out on this in terms of differences is, first off, when I lend my DAI, I'm receiving what is referred to as a RFT or RARI fund token. This is no big deal. This is the usual type of IOU token you get. Folks don't realize that when they lend DAI to Compound, they actually receive CDAI, and that when you lend DAI to other platforms, you're always receiving some sort of IOU token. Anyways, they call theirs an RFT. And then they are currently only lending those three assets across dYdX and Compound. So that's worth me noting because there are less pools that are being used for this yield bouncing strategy. So I know that these folks are new and that there will be more pools incorporated in the future. You can literally see it says, we will be generating yield from more currencies across more lending protocols, among other strategies. So that, yeah, they'll bring in more pools in the future. But as of now, I just want to be conscious that IDLE.FINANCE and Staked and Curve, the Curve Y pool, these are all lending across more pools. Another thing to consider is that, and I think this is very clever, is that they are taking the comp token, which is being earned by the fact that they are lending, let's say DAI and USDC and Tether, they're lending those to Compound at some point. When they do, they're earning the comp token. And every 3 days, they liquidate comp, which then adds yield, or however you want to classify it, or it's being put into your return. So what I'm earning here is also being topped up with profits from earning the comp token. And they're doing all of that automatically in the background. So I thought that was really clever. I actually haven't seen that before. Another thing worth noting is they call out a 20% performance fee is deducted from all yield earned. That's interest and earnings like comp. This is not something I'm aware of in terms of how this compares with staked. Staked also has a performance fee, and I'm not aware of whether IDLE does. But anyways, just worth noting that. And I think at the end of the day, this app is new. So in due time, I'm hoping to see whether or not RARI is able to outperform whether I had just left my DAI lending in a compound pool. The last thing to note with RARI Capital is that they also attempt to maximize interest by potentially swapping the tokens that you deposit into their yield bouncer. So think of it this way. If the DAI token is earning 7% APY today and USDC is earning 1%, and someone comes here and chooses USDC, what they will do is they will swap that USDC as you're depositing it. So this is happening in the background. They'll swap it, they use 0x to do it, and then it'll end up being deposited actually as DAI. Now this allows RARI to earn more interest for you, but be aware that if it's doing that, there's a chance that I'm paying a larger transaction fee up front than what I would have otherwise. But anyways, again, this is all new stuff. I thought they're pretty clever ideas to maximize interest between the comp thing, the comp profits, and then this idea of basically swapping out your DAI for USDC. Just a recap of the risks that I've covered today in using any one of these 4 yield bouncers. First, I am exposed to the smart contracts that are a part of these 4 different yield bouncer platforms. And so there's that, but then there's also the pools that they're lending across. And so I want to be aware of that sort of additive risk in terms of having exposure to smart contracts in all of these lending pools plus the actual yield bouncer. Another thing that I'm concerned about always with stablecoins is if a stablecoin depeg, that would be pretty disastrous for me. So that's another thing when I'm holding something like DAI or USDC or Tether, just I want to be aware of that risk. Another risk is, of course, admin key risk. I'm not aware of what sort of rights staked, IDLE, or RARI have with an admin key. I am aware with Curve because they have laid it out nicely here on a risks tab. So we can check that out. All right, here we go. An admin key allows us to pause the contract in an emergency, but only during the first 2 months in existence. Also, it allows to change amplification coefficient, curve parameter, admin fee, not more than half of the fee which LPs take, and the fee. All of the changes are time locked for 3 days and being applied for enough notice. Smart contracts cannot be upgraded with an admin key. This limits actions in case of emergency, but leaves users fully in control of their funds. Curve will be transitioning to a DAO to be fully decentralized. So anyways, that's the sort of information that I'd love to know about any of these platforms. And so anyways, admin key risk is something I am conscious of with IDLE, Staked, and RARI. RARI especially being brand new, I'm sure all the usual sorts of admin key rights are there. The last thing to be aware of would be governance compromise, but none of these have fully decentralized into a DAO yet, so I don't need to be concerned about that. As far as I know, I don't believe Staked, IDLE, I know Curve hasn't, but it will eventually, and I know RARI hasn't because it's brand new. So anyways, those are all the risks that I tend to think about, and those are the risks that I accept by participating in these yield bouncers. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope this is helpful. I would encourage anyone to go to app.defiscore.io first. It's a great place to learn about where are the highest interest rates. It also, for me, it was a wake-up call when I was lending to a certain platform at the time. I looked and realized that there were higher rates elsewhere and that I could be earning more. But instead of me chasing the highest interest rate and checking this thing daily, why would I do that when I can just use a yield bouncer? So these tools are really clever. You know, this to me is like, why would I go shopping for a flight on individual airline websites when I can use something like Expedia? In this case, it's actually these smart contracts that are used in Staked Ray, in IDLE.FINANCE, in the Curve Y pool, and then in RARI Capital. These are all moving my money across lending pools to the highest interest rates. Let me know if you have any questions about anything I covered here, and I'd love to learn what folks' experience has been using these tools.